Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about bringing mindfulness towards the feeling tone of experience. We have this rich, emotive world, being alive as a human being in the mind and in the body. And turning towards that is a really important part of a meditation practice. We are wired as human beings with, neurochemicals like dopamine and serotonin and oxytocin, right? This connection to other people. And also things like cortisol, the stress hormones, and we have the amygdala, the fear center of the brain, and fight or flight responses. So the key thing here with mindfulness is that if we're trying to find stability in getting things pleasant all of the time, it's not going to work out because our bodies are wired to actually warn us, warn us of fear, of danger, of stress, of things like that. Sadness is a really important part of a human experience. And also we're wired for joy and connection. So these are an inevitable part of being alive. So our relationship towards them is really important. So I think this is important because there's a common misconception that I've heard before that mindfulness is like just going to that happy place or something like that. And it's like, yeah, sometimes I do feel good when I meditate, but quite a bit. I also have to sit through the days where I'm just down or I'm, feeling stressed or fearful or apprehensive about something. And that's actually a really important part of a meditation practice too. So turning towards this shadow side of experience is a really important part of a meditation practice. Some of the repressed memories or fears which we may have, turning towards them over time can be a source of a great healing. So today I'm going to talk about 3 different aspects of this process of turning towards feeling tones. And the first is to begin to release the identification, the way we identify with anxiety or depression or whatever it is, identifying with it. Also beginning to see some of the reactive tendencies that we can have along with feeling tones. Unpleasant sensation the mind wants to avoid, things like that. And then finally, through continually cultivating an awareness of these feeling tones, we begin to see how that there is actually a stability in the awareness itself. While the feelings may come and go and be pleasant or unpleasant, that which is aware of it becomes a source of stability, comfort, and can be a guidance in life. So in talking about feeling tones to start, the way of observing them in a meditation practice generally is to not use names of emotions, which can get a little bit swampy and murky. Feelings can have so many different flavors. But just to actually notice the bare quality of this is pleasant, this is unpleasant, or this feels neutral. There's no actual feeling here, and sometimes the mind can just not be interested at all in the experience. So again, this is connected to emotions, right? But it's not in a meditation practice. We're not actually noticing anxiety because that begins to become a little conceptualized and there can be some identification in that. This is my anxiety, things like that. So in meditation, what we're starting to do is actually de-identify from that feeling tone of experience. So instead of the feeling tone coming in and the mind feeling like this is who I am, this is always how it is, we can begin to notice this is just unpleasant feeling, this is happening right now. The more longer we sit, these things can begin to pass. So yeah, there's the shift from being identified to just being aware. And this is really important towards things like patterns of addiction, whatever it is, the phone, the TV, the food. I think to some degree these are very common. And it's important to notice, what is the mind doing at those times? Is it going, yeah, of course, sometimes I just am going to sit down and watch TV, but maybe 6 hours later, something's up, I've started to just check out. So for myself, patterns of addiction were a part of my past, substances. And these are like almost extreme versions of just trying to cling on to pleasant experience all the time, avoiding anything that's unpleasant by just using substances to try to feel good all the time. And so what I found is when I finally stopped using the substances, it was almost like I had stockpiled all of the unpleasant sensations of those years. And when I would sit and meditate, I was sitting through a lot of those patterns of avoidance and a lot of the fear and anxieties that I had, and pain, of sorrow and grief that I had avoided in that time. There's a weird alchemy that happens in the body when we push away unpleasant feelings, especially. And it's almost like the body just can't feel it in the moment, and it gets stored there and isn't able to just come through and move through the system and be released. So a huge part of meditation practice is to begin sitting with that shadow side. What is it that I've maybe avoided or don't want to feel? And learning to be with that with a sense of compassion and actually caring about it. And as that process happens, the more we sit, especially on things like meditation retreat, the body can start to feel more fluid. So seeing the patterns of grasping and aversion towards the feeling tones is a really central part of meditation. And so feeling tone itself is at the root of what we call clinging in Buddhist meditation. This is the root of all suffering. Holding on to that which we just want to keep permanently, and pushing away the experiences that we don't want is all clinging. And starting to notice feeling tone is really at the root of this practice. Because generally the things, for myself anyways, that I want to hold on to are the things, of course, which feel good, But unfortunately, we're in a world where change and impermanence is the only constant thing that we can actually rely on. So there's this silent, invisible kind of shadow, which doesn't mean that we can't also experience joy, but that we need to acknowledge both of them. So the shift that happens in a meditation practice is from reactivity towards recognition of what's happening, right? So this could be either in my daily life or when I'm sitting on the meditation cushion, and the mind could, this thing that's going to happen later today that I'm looking forward to, and it's going to be like this. And it's almost like the mind is already creating a pleasant version of how things might be, could be, and in that there's a reactivity. It feels good to hypothesize what this potential experience is going to be like. And in that process, it's running. This is reactivity towards the feeling tone. And the same could be said for a premonition of something which may happen, right? There's this negative feeling tone. There's this sense that there's something looming, something that's going to happen, which is going to be bad. And instead of actually just allowing and recognizing, okay, this is my mind, my body trying to warn me, sometimes the mind can go into reactive patterns of maybe wanting to avoid it and just distract with something that is more pleasant. This is a really important part of seated meditation practice, of just watching how many times the mind tries to just go and find something which is interesting or pleasant to think about, to just avoid sometimes either the unpleasantness or often just the neutrality of experience, right? It's just too boring to just sit here and not have some stimulation happening. So the mind can go just to try to find something. So these are all forms of reactivity. So this is where the wisdom component begins to come in. And through seeing that these things are impermanent, that there's changing, we begin to de-identify from them and realize that these are actually, that I am not my anxiety, I'm not my depression, I'm not my addictive tendencies. These can come and go. So this impermanence is really central towards the wisdom which comes up in a meditation practice. And this takes time because a lot of these aspects of the mind happen almost subconsciously. It's like we don't even notice that they're happening when they're happening. Something happens and I just react without even realizing where my motivations are coming from. Maybe I'm actually afraid of, if this person makes this decision in their life, for instance, I might be afraid of how I'm going to have to adjust if they move, or if they are not going to be working with me or something like that, right? So I might be subconsciously bringing my own agenda regardless of what might be good for them or for myself and things like this. So beginning to be aware of these, of the feeling tone, can begin to allow us to have a little more wisdom and a little more compassion for ourselves and others. So some of the most relevant examples of this reactivity that happens is like just picking up the telephone, right? It's like, why am I even picking this up right now? Sometimes I don't even know. It's like, I'm just hoping there's going to be I'm going to get some kind of a dopamine hit from it. And I'll sometimes be spending so much time with the phone that I'll just realize, like, I think I'm exhausted. I'm not getting any more joy out of it. I'm just, at this point, I'm just doom scrolling or whatever, you know? And also, for me, sometimes conversations with others, right? Why am I having an unpleasant aversion to what this person is saying? It makes me want to avoid or change the topic instead of actually listen to what they're saying sometimes. So cultivating a quality of equanimity towards these things, a balanced mind which can bear with them, can invoke more wisdom in our lives. And so another important part about this is that through not being reactive towards the feeling tones, we begin to notice these quality of mind, of awareness, which is present when we're not in reactivity. And these are some of the beautiful qualities which begin to unfold in a meditation practice through things like equanimity, right? The more that we can be equanimous, less reactive with these emotions and the feeling tones that come along with them, the more the mind begins to notice, oh, there's some space here. It feels good, these basic presence of mind. So the way this is phrased in early Buddhism is that there are worldly and unworldly feeling tones, and that the worldly feeling tones, which I've been talking about, is just the temporary pleasures and things like that. And the unworldly is actually the joy which comes through the mind being concentrated, through things like equanimity. The mind begins to feel more spacious. As the mind begins to settle into the body more, this quality of embodied awareness can bring real feelings and sensations of joy in life. There's a happiness there. And this is, for me, a huge part of what has propelled me through a meditation practice. When I first started sitting, this was many, many years ago. I learned to meditate when I was around 20 years old, 19. I'm in my late 30s now. And I remember I came home, I had spent some time in Nepal learning from teachers, and I started to have experiences where I would sometimes be going, I was outside of Kathmandu at the time, and I would go out and sit on the hills on the weekends with a friend of mine. And something about just sitting there and watching the grass blades blowing in the breeze, it was like I tapped into something so simple and direct and beautiful that it never left me. It was almost like, oh, I had a reference point for a joy that didn't require me to have any external circumstances in any particular way. I was just sitting on the side of a hill. And I came home and became a musician, and I've had a busy life, and we was drinking a lot and partying, but every now and then I would sit down still in the morning, and I was get a glimpse into, oh yeah, how good it feels, how clear the mind can be through just sitting down for 30 minutes, right? This is some of this unworldly joy. It's not dependent on the conditions around. The mind can feel some space, and this is to be encouraged in meditation practice. And so later, when I got into recovery and was out of addiction, I quickly caught on to that. It wasn't great. I was still experiencing a lot of anxiety and stress from the way I had been living, but I noticed that even 20 minutes or 30 minutes of just having a break from what was usually happening in my mind, of setting that down and just being aware that there was something beginning to open and to grow in my mind, a quality of presence and some of the real beautiful qualities that can come about. And the more that this grows, the more it can grow into the embodied awareness. The more we begin to feel, sometimes it's almost like a tingling, or like the presence of the nervous system in the body beginning to light up from this presence of mind. And so what was encouraged by the Buddha in meditation is that this joy, these are, he called these unworldly or spiritual pleasant feelings which happen in meditation, which are to be encouraged and lead towards greater joy and towards greater freedom, because they are actually not dependent on getting the external circumstances just right. They come through balance. There's the simile of the lute in early Buddhism, where it's like a stringed instrument, and when it's tightened too much, it's out of tune. And if it's loosened too much, it's also out of tune, right? It's flat. And this is the same thing within a meditation practice. When the mind is trying really hard, if it's holding on to experience, it's out of balance. When it's completely checking out or lazy, these feelings I'm quite familiar with myself, it's also out of balance. It's through this presence of mind that the real joy begins to unfold. So I'm going to start trying to wrap it up here, because I realize I'm talking longer than I thought I would. But the key here is to becoming aware of these various feeling tones, right? The pleasant, the unpleasant, or the neutral, to begin to de-identifying with them, to seeing that they're actually impermanent, they're changing, they're fluid, they're not who we are ultimately. And in that process, a real wisdom of mindfulness can begin to unfold through equanimity towards them. And these unworldly sensations of just having presence of mind are said to be a safe refuge. In early Buddhist meditation, there's a metaphor for the simile of the raft. And it's said that the raft of these teachings, the teachings of the Buddha, can carry one to the other side, towards freedom and towards liberation. And when we get to the other side, the raft is no longer needed. The raft is left behind because you don't carry the raft onto the shore. So in the same way that some of our suffering can drive us towards practice, some of the challenges we've had, also these beautiful qualities of mind which come about in meditation can also be the support which continually moves this raft towards greater and greater freedom. So I hope this has been helpful and that it's something you can actually use in your life. And I'll offer a separate guided meditation to go along with this. Thank you and be well.